In terms of survival, it is often not predators that pose the greatest threat. Threats are those like you that are superior to you in any of your characteristics. The same can be said for people. Study, work, love, they're constantly competing with each other. People sitting in the office looked in amazement at the protagonist who finished the task in no time. The boss of the protagonist, sitting in his office, felt a shiver all over his body because he knew that the protagonist was coming straight to him and he did not know what to do next. But his assistant, pouring into his mug-flavored tea, said that the protagonist is just a trainee and do not worry about it. However, the boss did not consider him a mere trainee, because in less than half a year, 3 managers and 1 department head had left the company because of him. Only a monster, whose strength and endurance are incomparable to a human's, could do such a thing. He was unusually efficient in his work. All those who tried to plot against him were shamefully defeated. The board of directors could not fail to notice such a strong employee, and the boss was afraid that sooner or later he would meet him face to face, and then he would lose to him without a single chance, giving up his position in the company. The next instant, he hit the table with tremendous force. Well, after a brief moment, his irritability faded, and he agreed with his assistant. After all, he is the boss here and shouldn't be afraid of some goon. Suddenly, the protagonist appeared, telling the boss that he was about to walk in on him. He was like a wild beast that saw only its goal and nothing could stop it. He held out many pieces of paper and told his boss that he had brought him a report. Upon realizing that Wang Ziwan had completed such a difficult task in the shortest amount of time, the boss, along with his assistant, experienced a great shock. After that, our story shifts to a city that glittered like a diamond in the sunlight. Wang Ziwan was sitting under an umbrella that kept the sun's rays from hitting him. Who would have thought the boss would give up so quickly? For a moment, that thought appeared in his mind. Sitting surrounded by beautiful girls whose faces were filled with joy, Wang Ziwan was clearly not so joyful. Lately, the company he worked for was getting boring. He wondered if he should change his job. Suddenly, the phone, which had been lying there before without a single noise, vibrated and broke the so peaceful silence. The message that appeared on the phone read, "This stage will suit you." As soon as Wang Ziwan read this message, he fixed his gaze and stared intently at the phone. The detailed characteristics of our protagonist, such as stamina, intelligence, reflexes, and so on, appeared on the phone screen. Immediately afterward, the phone screen began to emit a bright blue light. This signaled the beginning of the startup procedure. In the same second, Wang Ziyuan found himself in a strange and mysterious place that was glowing with the same blue light as the phone he had recently held in his hands. It was immediately clear from his uncertain movements that he was in this place for the first time and was disoriented. A girl suddenly appeared to greet him and said, "Welcome to the survival game." Unlike Wang Ziyuan, her movements were more confident, as if she had been here before. As bright blue flower petals fell down behind her, she informed the protagonist that he had arrived at the gods' domain. Limitless realms of the gods. Players must plunge into a boundless new world and dedicate themselves to the fulfillment of various tasks. Some will fight dragons of monstrous size, which are ready to destroy all life in their path, leaving only death behind. Someone like a spy will quietly and stealthily sneak around in the dark alleys, tracking their cherished target. Some will fight for the glory of the king. The girl said that the game is currently gaining popularity rapidly, so from time to time, there will be new players who manage to pass the system's selection. Wang Ziyuan was one of the few who managed to pass the system's selection, but aside from that, he had a test to pass. Looking carefully at his surroundings and deciding to try out a flower petal that was glowing with a bright blue light, he realized that he couldn't tell the difference between this place and the real one. Even with the most advanced technology, it was impossible to achieve such a grandiose effect and realism. This fact was for him the biggest surprise he had ever experienced in his life. The newly arrived players also didn't understand what kind of place they were in. Some demanded to be brought back immediately, while some just stood silently looking around. Wang Ziyuan realized that the other players also had no choice, and the system immediately sent them back here without any further ado and without any further conversation. Calling the newly appeared girl a goddess, he asked if he could ask her a question. Ella told him that he had no problem asking a question. She wasn't a goddess, though. She was one of the players, but more experienced than the others. This time, her mission was to escort Wang Ziyuan to the testing site. He asked her, "What happens if you fail the test? Would you be able to get out of the game?" She reminded him that since this was a survival game, there was no way out. Wang Ziyuan could not have any contact with the outside world. However, in between going through dungeons, he could return to his personal space to rest. Personal space was where Wang Ziyuan was right now. As he stretched his hand forward, he realized that his personal space was bounded by an invisible wall. He was frustrated by the fact that he would have to return to such a small space after every dungeon. Ella told him not to worry too much. Most of the dungeons were not life-threatening. For example, in the upcoming challenge, the reward would depend on how he performed. For completing tasks, he will be able to earn points that can be used to expand his personal space, serve as a medium of exchange, and help him create his personal Eden. What was really important was that with these points, he could become stronger. Equipment, technology, and outstanding ability, servants, miracles, and even life. Here he could have everything his soul desired. Well, as it turns out, those awards Ella showed recently were just for show. Those were high-level awards, and even she didn't have them yet. As a beginner, he would be given 3 random F-rank cards. At the same second, 3 cards appeared right in front of him, hovering in the air. But unlike the ones he had seen before, these cards didn't look so appealing. Among these cards were various abilities and equipment, also that he could familiarize himself with how things functioned here as soon as possible. The skills and abilities could be immediately mastered, and the equipment would be stored in the inventory. Touching the card that emitted bright electric discharges, he thought, is this really his new ability? He would never have thought that he would be able to encounter something like this. Putting her hand up, Ella said, "It's time to begin." Immediately afterward, all the players were surrounded by a blue glow with a circular shape. Wang Ziyuan now realized that the world was vast and far more interesting than he had imagined before. There was a sense of anticipation of how in just a few moments he would be on his first mission in such an amazing world full of mysteries and secrets. But only a few seconds later, instead of the much-anticipated dungeon, he saw office workers walking leisurely past him. A message appeared on the phone saying that player F223 had been disabled. Seeing this message, Wang Ziyuan only experienced tremendous feelings of incomprehension. He had returned to the real world, but was that really possible? But suddenly, something very swiftly caught his attention. A message appeared on the phone again. This time, it was telling Wang Ziyuan to connect within 10 minutes, or else the mission would be failed. A panel with various information appeared in front of him, but among all the buttons, the one that caught his attention was the one that said downloaded abilities. He wondered if his abilities could also be used in real life. Deciding to test what ability he had managed to get, he pressed the button. In the same second, an ability card appeared in front of him. It consumed spiritual energy and emitted a faint electrical charge when it touched the object. The continent of Grey Feather, a territory inhabited by a huge number of undead. You are a bunch of amateur adventurers who have come here with the goal of destroying the goblins. However, the goblins cut off your escape routes by luring you to their lord's lair. Looks like the hunter and the prey have switched places. Player number 234 joined the system, and he was none other than Wang Ziyuan. He was like a hologram that slowly made up the image of a person. When he finally connected to the game, he saw a sign with information about himself in front of him, but there was nothing else there except his name and online status. As soon as the waiting time was up, the system connected him to the game on its own. Of course, he wouldn't be allowed to completely disconnect and return to the real world. But the most depressing fact was that he wasn't even allowed to bring along various equipment that would have undoubtedly helped him in further trials. But suddenly, a sound nearby drew him away from his musings, and he began to listen. The goblin, only lightly dressed in tattered clothing and carrying a wooden club with nails sticking out of it, strolled quietly and leisurely through the cave. As if sensing that there was an intruder in the cave, the goblin stopped and began to look around carefully. And in order to avoid being caught by the goblin, Wang Ziyuan hid and watched the goblin closely. He had been off his game for too long. The team had already advanced quite a distance. In games like this, even a few minutes of AFK can make a complete difference. Basically, it is possible to wait until the end of the game in offline mode, but it will not be possible to observe what is happening, as well as the progress of other players. Sensing the danger behind him, the goblin became wary, and his body trembled. Wang Ziyuan slowly approached his cherished prey like a wild beast. Determined to find out who was lurking behind him, the goblin slowly turned around and looked back. But not even a second passed before Wang Ziyuan delivered a crushing blow to the goblin, sending him flying like a tertiary puppet. After realizing that the opponent in front of him was so weak, unable to withstand even a single strike, Wang Ziyuan realized that since this was a beginner's exam, it shouldn't be difficult. Goblins are just monsters, with a childish build. People just need to overcome their fear and start a battle, and then it won't be difficult to win. If even an ordinary civilian could handle such a monster, then what to speak of those who had undergone military training? Wang Ziyuan was just one of those who had bothered to undergo such training. Being confident in his strength, Wang Ziyuan, as if he was a martial arts master, stood in a fighting stance and suspected the goblin to him. But suddenly the goblin drew his weapon, and for a few seconds there was a sepulchral silence. And as soon as Wang Ziyuan realized that the goblin he thought was a weak and worthless opponent was aiming his weapon at him right now, it seemed like hunter and prey had switched places. At the same second, a loud noise erupted from somewhere above, filling the entire cave. The goblins, riding a motorcycle, rode down a steep rocky slope, and while the first goblin drove the motorcycle, the second goblin was firing firearms, running away from the pursuers who were inexorably approaching him. Wang Ziyuan could not understand why in this world, instead of walking with sticks and throwing stones, goblins used weapons and rode motorcycles. The main goal of this mission was to destroy the goblins. Well, here's a question. How can Wang Quan defeat the enemies with his bare hands when they oppose him with equipment and firearms? Continuing to run away from his pursuers, he opened the blue-colored panel in front of him. As he remembered, this quest was created mainly to train newcomers to use in-game abilities and equipment. A menu with a selection of cards appeared in front of him, but something about them was off. Wasting no time in selecting the bomb card, he realized that these were not the cards he had been given earlier. He gradually began to realize why this happened, and forgetting about the goblins that were chasing him, he stopped in place. And taking advantage of this, the goblins quickly caught up with him. The enemy's weapon finally reached its target, but instead of seeing a lifeless body falling to the ground, the goblin only saw the hologram that was left behind by Wang Ziyuan. Goblin didn't understand. How could this be possible? But now, the main problem wasn't Wang Ziyuan at all, but the bomb he had recently set off. It was only a few moments before the fuse would completely burn out. A split second later, a deafening explosion erupted, leaving no trace of the goblins chasing the protagonist. This time, Wang Ziyuan connected to system number 235. He realized that when he reconnected to the game, his location remained the same. But since the temporary account number has been changed, accordingly, all information tied to the past account is reset, and with that, he is given 3 new completely random cards with abilities and skills. Meanwhile, the explosion left behind only the lifeless bodies of the goblins and shards of the motorcycle, flying in different directions. As he greedily consumed the life potion, he thought it was because he had been disconnected from the system, and the system thought he was dead. So the account was immediately deleted, and while the new goblins were still chasing him, he realized that he could connect multiple times, which would be considered by the system as a new player joining. But he realized that this was most likely a kind of gift for newcomers, and there would be no such opportunity in the future. The goblins pursued him relentlessly and shot at him with every possible weapon. The battle didn't stop for a second. It felt as if a flame of war had erupted in the quiet and peaceful cave and was inexorably spreading, destroying everything around. He realized he could endlessly change the playing cards. The goblin suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of the protagonist each time. Holding 6 crystals in his hand, he realized that if he passed this exam with 100%, he would thus ensure himself a flawless start in this game. This time our story moves to a dungeon testing new players, the Goblin Killer. The underground valley was decorated with brightly glowing mushrooms. Such a beautiful valley would be impossible to see in the real world. It could only be imagined in fantasies. Player number 151, Shen Yuji, used his spell to cure the girl. After finishing the treatment, he asked her if she could walk. Player number 47, Yun Shan, thanked him for such a weighty help. All the wounds had healed literally before her eyes. But she also realized that this was one of the items Shen Yuji had received, so she asked him, what would he do if he suddenly needed this item? With a wave of his hand, Shen Yuji told her that he didn't care. It was just a lousy game to him, and if he died, he should still be revived. But the player at number 21 Young Mi was not as cocky as Shen Yuji. He wondered if there was such a daredevil among them that would dare to confirm this revival hypothesis. Who would dare to kill himself to know for sure if he would be reborn again in his personal space? These questions did not give him any rest, and he kept thinking, is there an answer to these questions that tormented him? Shen Yuji said that there had already been a revival attempt. One person fell off the cliff, and the other hid and wanted to observe the future course of events, but he also disappeared without a trace, so no one could neither confirm nor deny this hypothesis. There were more and more questions each time, but there was no answer to them. What nonsense. This is a beginner's challenge dungeon after all, Young Mi said, still remaining in ignorance and misunderstanding the essence of the game. But Yunshan didn't wonder if rebirth was possible in this game. She only realized that if it wasn't for them, she would just be left here to live out her last moments. Taking out a cigarette and putting a lighter to it, Shen Yuji wondered what they should do next. The further they advanced, the more likely they were to encounter stronger monsters. This way, their chances of dying really increased each time. Yang Mi said that the mission description said it was an extermination expedition. But whatever it really was, the main purpose of what was happening was to teach them how to survive in such a harsh environment. He wondered, would they just have to find the right place and wait for the time allotted for the mission to end? But he wasn't sure of his theory. It was too risky. Not a single clue as to what to do next. Loosely lighting a cigarette, Shen Yuji wondered, did they really need to risk their lives just to accomplish this stupid mission? It all sounded kind of stupid to him. Being frightened and not knowing what to do next, the thought popped into each of their minds. What if they really could never go back? The calm and peaceful atmosphere was interrupted by the sudden appearance of the goblin, who was rapidly approaching Yunshan, and she just froze in place, unable to move from the fear that gripped her body. In that second, Shen Yuji took out his weapon from his inventory, but he realized that it was already too late, and he wouldn't be able to save Yunshan in time. But suddenly, like a ray of hope, Wang Ziyuan slammed into the goblin with tremendous speed, sending the latter into a knockout and a distant flight. Yunshan's face showed only incomprehension, and she stood silently watching. For a moment, Wang Ziyuan and Yunshan's gazes met. Looking at Wang Zhuan, Shen Yuji wondered if this was the player who had not been found near the cliff back then. To his great surprise, that player was still alive. Yang Mi, also carefully watching the protagonist, realized that he had rushed into battle. He also wondered if Wang Ziyuan had realized the true essence of this mission. Looking at the fearless Wang Zhuan, Shen Yuji realized that he didn't worry about death, didn't think about anything, and just boldly rushed forward, putting everything he had on the line. Such amazing fearlessness and strong will amazed him to the core. Yang Mi wondered if Wang Ziyuan had intentionally made such a swift attack to gather the right information and make the right judgments. Such an act required incredible determination. Taking a closer look at him, Yunshan remembered that it was player number 1985, Wang Huan. Having finally finished fighting with the goblins and greedily absorbing the oxygen, Wang Ziyuan realized that the combination of light boots, swift movement scroll, and speed push was simply incredible. However, it was too much for the human body. It was already at its limit. Therefore, some elements needed to be replaced urgently. Thinking back to the people he had met recently, Wang Ziyuan thought, are these really other players? Time was running out, and they were not taking any action. Wang Ziyuan realized that such players were unable to compete with him, so he could forget about them and move on. He pressed the exit button. After the 1000th update, he started getting familiar cards. It seems the F-rank card set wasn't that diverse. The value of the upper limit of inventory capacity had long since been exceeded. It was pointless to keep purging it all, so he decided to just remove the recurring cards and move on. After clearing his inventory of unnecessary debris, he prepared to face the boss. However, judging from the backstory he had heard, the boss would be a bit difficult to deal with for a novice. Every time he logged back into the game, the mission progress disappeared. Killing ordinary goblins was pointless, so he needed a bigger opponent to get a better reward for his journey. Just one battle, and the test of the dungeon will be passed. Determined to finally face his boss, he started down the mountain. After descending the mountain and taking out his sword, which was shrouded in blue smoke, he prepared to finally finish off the boss. Upon seeing the enemy, the Goblin Lord immediately pulled out a huge firearm. It was just right for his size. If ordinary goblins had weak firearms, then their Goblin Lord was bound to have a weapon of much higher power. Having learned his lesson with the goblins he had met earlier, he was prepared for their overlord to have firearms as well. But in such a long time, he had also managed to obtain a pretty good F-rank weapon called Reverse Effect. The ability of this weapon was that once the player took a defensive stance, the damage directed at him would be reversed. As if knowing what kind of weapon his opponent possessed, The Goblin Lord did not dare to shoot him, but even though the Goblin Lord knew what kind of weapon Wang Ziyuan possessed, he knew what he should do next. In the same second, blue circles appeared around his eye. As it turned out, in addition to having a good weapon, he also had a coercive ability that required the target to complete the action he had started earlier. Unable to resist the ability, the Goblin Lord pulled the trigger and shot at Wang Ziyuan. Finally, the battle had begun, but even though he managed to deflect the bullets, Oni managed to inflict an impressive amount of damage on him. But much worse was the Goblin Lord, who had been hurt by his own weapon. Deciding not to delay the main task, Wang Ziyuan decided to finally finish off the main boss. But suddenly, a bright flash came from somewhere above, causing substantial damage to the Goblin Lord. The players that Wang Ziyuan had met earlier decided to keep up with him and followed him, determined to help him with the final boss. As soon as he saw them, he started shouting at them to stay away. Thinking that he was worried about them, they told him that they were not afraid of death and would not leave a comrade in distress. After realizing that he had some competitors, Wang Ziyuan immediately rushed towards the Goblin Lord to finish this mission as soon as possible, because he believed that these players wanted to leave him with nothing and insidiously take the entire reward for themselves. Immediately after, our story is transferred instead, the sight of which was mesmerizing to the core. Suddenly there was a message that a friend was requesting access to personal space. This request was approved. After that, Xiaoxi, nicknamed Invisible Warrior, appeared in the air. She asked, "How is it going?" Ella, drinking a Coke and eating various goodies, said that she had already found the dragon and thought she could defeat it. But Xiaoxi shouted aggressively and said that she wasn't interested in that. She was asking about the newcomers she had recently selected. But Ella clearly wasn't worried about the newcomers. They can't die anyway. What could be the problem? Over 100 people in 23 dungeons, they should probably finish their missions soon. Xiaoxi asked her if she felt like she was trying too hard, even though she was a guide. But the main question that plagued her was why would she pay for every newcomer to be resurrected? What was she trying to accomplish? Xiaoxi said that under such conditions, not everyone would be able to adapt to the situation. Most people will simply die without ever waking up. Therefore, the death rate of the dungeon for newcomers is quite high. But Ella, trying to change Xiaoxi's mind, said that they had only come to them. Why not help a little? Especially one rebirth cost 10 points, and even if each of them died once, the total cost would only be 1,000 points. But Xiaoxi, whose opinion was unwavering, said that Ella hadn't considered the need to expand the game space. It all looks beautiful, but no one needs those gorgeous sceneries in the middle of a battle. Ella asked her a perfectly logical question. What's wrong with liking beautiful scenery? Xiaoxi finally accepted this fact and didn't want to change Ella's mind. But on top of that, she had come to her to ask about the D-rank artifacts needed to advance to the 30th level. She asked Ella if she had prepared everything she needed. Ella replied without hesitation that she had over 30,000 points, so everything would go smoothly and without any complications. But upon opening her panel, she saw to her greatest shock that she only had a little over 2,000 points left. Xiaoxi was also shocked by the fact that there were only 2,000 points left out of 30,000 points, which meant that the player resurrection had cost her 28,000 points. She let out tears of despair, as if trying not to go crazy, and lied to herself and said it was just a dream and everything would be fine. She would just die, and everything would be fine. Xiaoxi, seeing her friend starting to go a little crazy, tried every possible way to reach her mind to stop this madness. Meanwhile, our story returns to Wang Zhuan, who has successfully completed the mission, and as it turned out there was an extra reward for the boss. He would be extremely happy that he had enough supplies in his inventory to deal with this monster. On top of that, he also prevented those kids from taking away his points. Shen Yuji and Yunshan wondered the question that immediately began to plague their minds. Why did the message that the mission was over appear? It was still time after all. But only Yang Mi didn't have any questions. He just thought that killing the boss was the key to completing the mission. The message that appeared above Wang Zhuan's head stated that player number 2795 would complete the task on the topic for beginners and return to his personal space. In just a few seconds, he was in his personal space, and the system congratulated him for so triumphantly completing the beginner's dungeon challenge, and he now had a permanent account. Now, instead of a number, there was his name and level. The realization that he would not be able to revive forever, now that the level countdown had been started, made him very sad, and his face did not express a single drop of joy. However, aside from the fact that he now had a permanent account, he was also frustrated by the fact that his personal space was such a tiny size. In an effort to cheer up Wang Ziyuan, the system announced that players could expand their personal space as they wished, only paying 1 point per square meter. It was also possible to purchase a huge number of items of furniture, decor, landscape variations, and more. Such an extensive variety was made to make the players stay in the game as comfortable as possible. Well, waved off such a tempting offer, Wang Ziyuan didn't understand. Why would he waste such precious points on this if he could quit the game at any time? Of course, he wanted to spend it not on decorative elements, but on becoming a mighty warrior, able to move mountains with a single glance and destroy all enemies on his way. And since he wanted to become a powerful warrior, he wondered how to go about it. He inexorably began searching for a store that might have something that could help him become a warrior. But suddenly, he was distracted by Xiaoxi, who introduced herself as a guide and was very happy to inform him that he had become an official player of the boundless god realm. She was here to help him understand the exchange system, but Wang Ziyuan noticed that this was not the same guide he had seen before. He immediately told Xiaoxi about it. Slightly trembling with excitement, she informed him that there was a slight problem with the previous guide, and so she was here to tell him how to use the points earned. In a nutshell, bonus points are the exchange currency in the domain of the gods. They can be used to expand your personal space, buy necessities, strengthen your existing abilities and equipment, exchange for resurrection in dungeons with deadly tasks, and much more. But the main thing was that he could buy gift boxes, but the level of its contents directly depended on the level of the protagonist. And since he was a new player, he could only open the F-rank box. But there was a 5% chance that an E-rank item could fall out of an F-rank box. This whole box thing seemed like a simple lottery to him, impossible to win anything worth paying attention to. He asked Xiaoxi if he could buy an enhancement for his abilities and equipment. Xiaoxi replied without hesitation that he couldn't just buy an improvement. However, she also said that if he was lucky enough to draw a higher-ranked card, his game would be as comfortable as possible in the early stages. Well, in her opinion, since he had just completed the rookie dungeon mission, he might have less than 10 points. She advised him to improve his personal space and go through more dungeons to earn more points. Finally deciding to end such a fascinating conversation, she waved her hand and bid him farewell. Expressing great gratitude to her for all the information she had provided, Wang Ziyuan bowed. But suddenly, after analyzing her words, he realized that most players didn't even have 10 points, and he not only had 25 points, but he also had a bunch of F-rank items, so the start in this game was perfect for him. The box lottery that Xiaoxi had previously told Xiaoxi about did not appeal to him at all. It had his heart set on what item should he refine. However, the banner with the ranked cards above caught his attention, and he could no longer look away. They were like gold that lured desperate players who wanted to get their hands on the coveted cards as quickly as possible. Still daring to open the box, he decided to try his luck just once for himself. A purple card burst out of the box at a rapid speed, surrounded by an equally bright purple glow. It was an F-rank card, and Wang Ziyuan was not at all happy about such a gift that fate had prepared for him. Experiencing anger and rage at having gotten such a terrible spell, he stopped believing in any success with these boxes. But suddenly, his attention was caught by a green light that sought to burst out of the box, and in the same second, 3 E-rank cards appeared in front of him. After realizing this, the anger he had been feeling recently evaporated without a trace, and now he only felt a boundless sense of joy. But the message that appeared said it was a special reward, so he could only choose one card. Trying to keep a sane mind and not give in to emotions, he realized that choosing a card should be done wisely, carefully analyzing everything, and suddenly, he realized that he could just log out, wait for the next notification from the system, and then choose one of the cards based on the situation. Leaving the game, he re-entered the real world, which didn't look all that colorful compared to the game. The system informed him that he had to return to the game within 12 hours. Now, with an official account, he could be offline for quite some time, so there's nothing to worry about. However, his calmness didn't last long, and his boss, like a monster lurking in the shadows, appeared right in front of him. He stared intently into the very depths of Wang Ziyuan's soul, not taking his gaze away from him even for a second. The people sitting in the office were watching the event with great interest. Smiling a devilish smile, as if a demonic voice from the farthest reaches of hell, he asked him a question. And what are we doing here, sleeping in the workplace? As if not noticing that the boss was embittered, Wang Ziyuan greeted him as if nothing had happened and asked him what he wanted. Continuing to smile a devilishly sinister smile, laughing slightly, the boss said that of course he wanted something from him. And as he continued to smile, his mind was filled with glee at the fact that he had managed to catch the perfect trainee making a mistake. Now he was going to show him what real hell was like. The boss's assistant, who suddenly appeared, was running towards him with great speed, trying to warn him. Turning around to her, he said that he was very busy right now. Wang Ziyuan watched this as if it was a circus that was happening right in front of him. Feeling quite anxious, she told her boss with a tremor in her voice that the head of the head office had arrived, and there were a lot of people with him. They had come to check and were on their way. And judging by the look of the rest of the people, who very nervously welcomed the newly arrived guest, one could tell that this person was really very important. Realizing that a person from the head office had come to see him, the boss decided to calm his anger and did not continue talking to Wang Guan. However, unlike his boss, Wang Ziyuan was only interested in what had happened and couldn't just let it go. So to continue the fun, he activated a coercive ability. The staff members greeted Lin Xiao, who was rapidly advancing. One of the staff members asked him, "Did the board of directors give the relevant instructions?" But Lin Xiao, deciding to satisfy his curiosity, said that it was just an unscheduled inspection. As Wang Ziyuan expected, his boss was unable to resist the coercive ability and continued what he had started earlier. With a loud shout that echoed throughout the office, the boss told Wang Ziyuan that he was fired. As if feeling himself to be the immortal lord of this world, majestically towering over the protagonist, he asked him in an ominous voice if he wanted to kneel down and beg him to change his mind. The boss still continued to be relentless and talk. He said that the rapid rise of the company over the past few months was to his credit. On top of that, he had excellent references from the university, and he was so capable that people from the head office were interested in him. But Wang Ziyuan only kept silent as he sat there, waiting for further developments, not noticing that the man from the head office was standing behind him and staring at him intently. The boss did not hesitate to start telling all his secrets and everything that he had previously kept hidden in his soul. As he said, he was able to reach his current level because of his cunning and greed. But aside from that, he had also appropriated most of Wang Ziyuan's merits for himself. Well, as he thought, it didn't mean anything, because now he had caught him in his mistakes and could deservedly throw him out of here. He didn't give a damn about the director or those idiots at the head office. He didn't care what they had to say about it. He didn't care what the director or those idiots at the head office had to say about it. But in response to such a fascinating and lengthy speech, Wang Ziyuan only broke out into deafening laughter as he looked at his boss. And at this moment, the boss's body experienced a monstrous shiver all over his body, as if he realized that something had gone wrong, as if, recognizing that the man from the head office had been standing behind him all this time, he barely turned around, looking back, drops of sweat running down his face. Standing up from his chair, Wang Ziyuan applauded his boss. Lin Xiao also applauded the boss. Absolutely, all the people standing around the boss applauded him. The entire floor was filled with deafening sounds of applause, but instead of joy and pride, the boss felt only fear and incomprehension. Trying to deal with the sudden situation, he said it was just a prank and apologized for his stupidity. Our story then moves to the main entrance of the office building, near which a huge, long white limousine was parked. Lin Xiao, sitting in the back seat, ordered the driver to drive on. They were already finished here, and as soon as the limo drove away, it was clear that the boss, who had recently felt like the lord of this world, had been dishonorably discharged from the company. Sitting in the CEO's office, Wang Ziyuan was ecstatic that he could only achieve his goal with F-rank ability. He was incredibly pleased that he had succeeded in accomplishing this goal. And now, instead of his usual office chair, he sat in a comfortable chair in the CEO's office. According to his initial plan, the next step was to win people's hearts and achieve even more outstanding results. However, he wasn't interested in that right now. Real life paled in the face of a game where he had limitless possibilities and could travel to different worlds. As he left the office, he realized what was next going into the weekend, and so he could afford to play all night. The biggest advantage of moving up the career ladder, he thought, was his own office. That way he wouldn't have to worry that he might lose status in front of his colleagues if he overdid it a little too much. Having prepared himself a flavorful and delicious meal, He sat down at a table with a computer and decided to find out information about those players who couldn't get out of the game. He began searching the internet for information about collective comas, or the sudden death of large numbers of people. As expected, the internet met his needs, and he managed to find some news. The first news story was about a student who had passed out, and looking closely at her face, he realized that it was one of the guys he thought was trying to take away his award. But he wasn't entirely sure it was her, so he decided to just keep researching the news for now. The second news story was about the strange disappearance of a family of 3. He decided to study the news with this girl in detail. After opening the news, he turned on the video related to the news, in which it was reported that the student had lost consciousness. After receiving first aid, the girl went missing. Hospitals around the world said no patients matching the description were admitted for hospitalization. But suddenly the video stopped and a download appeared on the computer screen. The computer then displayed an error message on the screen saying that the video was no longer available or never existed. Wang Ziyuan had not expected this turn of events, and it slightly surprised him. Our story then shifts to the ambulance, which was speeding forward at breakneck speed. Several people dressed in medical uniforms were rushing forward, and the assistant boss tried to stop them, saying they couldn't get in. As it turned out, they were on their way to the CEO's office. Once inside, they saw only an empty office with a few chairs, a computer in the center, and a small number of books on the bookshelves. But the CEO himself was not here. Wang Ziyuan watched the ambulance with great interest. The thought popped into his head that he was wrong about reality. As it turned out, reality could be interesting too. After that, our story moves to Linjiang University, whose architecture could not fail to please the eye, and people passing by looked at such a beautiful and marvelous building with great admiration. Walking through the hall that was filled with people and books on the shelves, Wang Ziyuan realized that in the real world, there were also knowledgeable people who were responsible for sending new players into the system. However, as long as he didn't know about the details, any wrong move could only increase the risk to him. While trying not to stand out and politely greeting everyone, Wang Ziyuan also realized that these people absolutely did not wish to be exposed, and so they were trying to stay in the shadows. The final exam was approaching, so the library's packed study hall should be a pretty safe place. And since it was easy to hide among the crowd of students, Wang Ziyuan decided that they would be his cover. Upon seeing Wang Ziyuan, the people sitting nearby immediately hurriedly left the library, making up the most implausible excuses to do so. The others who remained seated in the library hall looked at him as if he were a madman who was studying 3 specialties at once and getting maximum scores in all possible tests. In his presence, they could not feel calm and relaxed for a second, for it would be a terrible thing for them to rest for even 5 minutes in the presence of such a man. Seeing how people were afraid of him like a mad monster, Wang Ziyuan tried to change their minds, saying that he didn't come here to study. Walking up to her friend and visibly nervous, the girl asked her if she was staying. The girl who wore glasses was not sure what answer to give. Wang Ziyuan realized that it would be very bad if he was left here completely alone, so he had no choice. He activated a coercive ability. As expected, the ability worked perfectly, and the girl, fixing her glasses with complete confidence in her voice and without a single hesitation, said she was staying. She said she had to finish the report no matter what. Realizing that their friend wouldn't go with them, the girls nervously said goodbye to her and walked away. And as soon as her friends left, the girl immediately realized what she had said. Greeted into the girl, Wang Ziyuan said that he would be happy to spend this time with her, and since they were alone, let everyone then try their best on their task. To him, this ability was simply incredible. Even in the real world, it was possible to control other people. Right now, however, his primary concern was gaining new abilities and building a unique security system for himself. Putting his finger to his ear and pressing the strange device, Wang Ziyuan said that it was time to start the game. At the same second, the startup procedure began, and he slowly began to immerse himself in the game system, leaving his real body sleeping in the library room. As soon as he logged in, a tablet appeared in front of him with a selection of difficulty, ranging from easy to very difficult. This turn of events really interested him, as it was something new as opposed to the experience of playing as a rookie. If reasoned logically, as a beginner, it would be more rational for him to opt for the easy difficulty level. This way he can familiarize himself with the gameplay and become more savvy in various aspects. He had no time for such childish fun now, however, and he was clearly not going to choose the easy difficulty level. He put his finger to the panel and selected a very difficult difficulty level. After a while, player selection was complete, and his first level was a bloody tower that was only illuminated by an equally bloody moon. It was the cursed land, where every night the devil went out hunting, tracking down his cherished prey. 9 brave men burst into the castle with the purpose of putting an end to the rampages of the unclean. However, the devil and his minions were already waiting for the unfortunate travelers. Braves must destroy the demons, and those in turn, using periodically descending darkness amplifying them. Track down, not kill the braves. It fits the players versus players mode. But aside from choosing the difficulty level, the system once again prompted him to choose the cards, as it had discovered that Wang Ziyuan hadn't picked them up last time. Now he realized that he couldn't pick a card once the game started, and his cards remained the same, and now it was no longer possible to collect himself a myriad of different cards. The first card was a sacrificial cloak that dealt area damage to surrounding enemies. It was very tempting, but in player versus player mode, it wasn't the best choice. The second card was a lucky coin that could affect the probability of an event, a universal thing. However, he no longer had any E-rank artifacts, and this coin wasn't something foundational that could make a difference at a critical moment. The last card left was the cannon, but in this dungeon, its use would be impractical. The choice was really difficult. Meanwhile, the girl who was sitting next to Wang Chuan wondered what he was doing there. And why did she even stay? What would she say if she wanted to leave? When she approached him and saw him sitting with his eyes closed by his laptop, she thought he was practicing listening, and since he was so absorbed in his work, she thought she'd be disturbing him with her presence, so she wanted to leave. But suddenly his motionless body tilted slightly, and just a fraction of a moment later, he touched his head to her body, still unconscious. The girl was unprepared for this turn of events. She only stood silently, her face reddening with the shame she felt. Meanwhile, Wang Ziyuan found himself in a soft and comfortable bed. When he looked around, he realized that this was the castle where the evil had taken up residence. But in spite of that, they had a good taste in interior decoration. Everything looked quite beautiful, elegant, but most importantly, everywhere there was a light red tone, which symbolized the devil himself. Soon, the game was about to start, and he was lucky enough to be on the demon team. The dungeon confrontation was divided into 2 teams, totaling 9 players, 6 braves and 3 demons. The main mission of the demon team was team victory. If at least one player from the team remains alive, the entire team is credited with victory. In case of victory, the player of the winning team gets 50 points. In case of loss, the player of the losing team will have to pay 50 points. Apart from the main mission, there were also side quests. For surviving, the player will receive a box with artifacts. For eliminating a player from the other team, the player will get 10 extra points. And for every 20% of the explored area, the player will get 10 extra points. The rules for the blood dungeon were fairly simple. Every hour, after the characteristic bell about, the effect of the blood moon would be imposed on all players. During this period, the braves will be weakened and deprived of some of the abilities, and the fighting power of demons in turn will be significantly increased. After the blood moon effect ends, all players can gather at the top of the tower and hold a meeting where justice will be served. After any of the players ring the bell of justice, the player with the most players voting in favor of being eliminated from the game will leave the game. The tower is full of secrets, clues to revealing the identity of demons, a way to enhance demonic abilities, and special rewards. Your eyes may deceive you, but your gut will never deceive you. Wang Ziyuan felt a burning interest in the upcoming battle. After analyzing all the above information, he realized that the braves had no information about the demon's identity, and they could only get clues by exploring the tower. Now it remained to be seen what was more effective, to prevent them from getting the clues, or to trick them at the justice meeting. The last important element of this challenge was that before the game started, the demon team players had 3 minutes to get to know each other. At the same second, several mysterious red silhouettes appeared in the room where Wang Ziyuan was. "Chosen by the darkness, we will crush the infidels together," were the words of the first partner, whose name was Liu Shengjun. The second demon was Xu Miao, who was no less experienced than Liu Shengjun. But suddenly, she noticed that there was a newcomer among them. Looking at Wang Ziyuan, who had settled down on the comfortable and soft bed, she wondered how a person who had just finished the rookie trial ended up here. The team members should have had roughly the same levels, at least 7th level. She and Liu Shengjun had 9th and 10th levels. but the rookie only had the first level. Wang Ziyuan explained to them that he had simply chosen the hardest difficulty level, in anticipation of more varied and complex missions. Xu Miao was amazed by the rookie's courage and praised him for it. However, she warned him that since he was a rookie, he had no right to lose because otherwise, he wouldn't be able to pay the cost of losing as he simply didn't have enough points. She said that a negative point balance is not fatal. However, he could get a bloody mark. That way, he wouldn't be protected by the system and could be seriously injured on the next mission. Such unexpected information was like a knife stabbed into his heart, making him freeze with fear. Now he had learned another important lesson of such a vast world of play. It was advisable to have points in reserve so that in case of anything, there would be no negative value on the balance. However, the guide he had consulted recently had not managed to inform him of such an important detail, and while experienced guide Ella, who had a huge amount of experience, was sad that all the points she had accumulated had faded into oblivion, her replacement Xiaoxi had no experience in the house to advise the players. Zhu Miao told the protagonist that he was extremely lucky, and that she would show him what the real game was. After all, as she said, level 10 players are the real bosses in this dungeon. Liu Xingjun was also determined, and was not going to lose to the opposing team. Feng Ziyuan said that he would try to keep up with them. Seeing this enthusiastic attitude of the newcomer, Xu Miao praised him for it and said that he would become a good player. As the waiting time was nearing its end, Liu Shengjun suggested that everyone discuss the available information. He was in a place together that was full of forbidden literature. It was completely useless to them, so he was going to destroy everything so that the literature wouldn't fall into his opponent's hands. After tapping on the floor and hearing a thud, he realized that he was somewhere on the upper floors. Zhu Miao was in the torture room. The door could not be opened, and she could see the tower and the corridor from the window. Feng Ziyuan decided to also report where he was. He was in the bedroom. The door and windows were not open. It was also impossible to break the glass. He didn't know if that would change when the game started. After thinking deeply for a few seconds and analyzing all the available information, Xu Miao assumed that nothing should change outside the tower. However, the doors would definitely open. The system wouldn't allow other players to expose them immediately, so the players from the Brave team should also be scattered in different rooms. Liu Xingjun said that the goddess of darkness had told him that they would meet the other players very soon. However, the system would not allow them to have a one-sided advantage by staying in the darkness forever. Zhu Miao said, "It's time to start." The rookie's main task was to at least protect himself. They were going to meet for about a year and explore the area. Wang Ziyuan said that he would try his best. Seeing such experienced players, he realized what a high level of difficulty is. These guys thought and acted rationally, had clear goals and plans to achieve them. As he approached the door and realized that it was open, he realized that their allotted time was up and the game had begun. The opponents had to be in their positions. After he opened the door, a majestic corridor decorated with bright colors and several stories high appeared before him. Seeing a person to his right, who was unfamiliar to him, Wang Ziyuan realized that their guesses were true. The Braves were already at their points in other rooms. As a newcomer, he had to hide well. More was not expected of him. Anyway, those two looked pretty reliable. The corridor, which until that moment had been quiet and calm, was plunged into a furious battle. Sensing danger behind him, the opponent of the demon team summoned the reflective prism ability to defend himself against the attacker. But Xu Miao, swiftly approaching him, delivered a crushing blow. Such a pathetic spell could not stop her desire to win the battle. A silhouette standing somewhere behind him shouted, calling for help from the rest of his allies, pointing to those who had started the massacre in the first place, since they were most likely demons. Sniper, who had arrived, immediately drew his rifle and took aim at the enemy. But suddenly, a meteor, shrouded in bright purple flames, was rapidly approaching from somewhere above. Such a sudden attack had disoriented the sniper, and now he couldn't focus on the battle. Liu Shengjun was overjoyed that his spell had managed to disorient such a strong enemy for a few moments. However, his pride had ruined him, as he had not noticed his opponent approaching from behind. Instantly reducing the distance between herself and the demon, the girl pierced it with her weapon, thus defeating the enemy. Realizing that this was his end, he was only glad that he was able to participate in such a glorious battle. In the same second, his body vaporized, and a deafening purple explosion erupted throughout the hallway. The girl barely had time to surround herself with a protective field, narrowly missing the blast's impact zone. She was glad to hear that her partner had come to her aid, but Xu Miao was not behind her opponents and had already managed to take the life of one of their allies. The huge sword was piercing his body, and there was no chance of survival. However, after realizing that she had also been mortally wounded, she accepted her fate, albeit sadly, with honor. However, Sniper managed to take the life of one demon, quickly returning to the fight after being disoriented. The demon team managed to take the life of one brave, but the braves managed to take the lives of 2 high-level demons. And now, Wang Ziyuan was left all alone against 5 braves, and the blood moon effect was only supposed to come in an hour. Suddenly, Yu Shan, who had managed to increase her level to level 2, appeared in front of him. She said that they had met in the beginner's dungeon. Surprised to see her so suddenly, he greeted her. But at the same moment, he remembered that she was the same incapable woman who he thought wanted to take away his rewards. However, he noticed that she had a second level, and as soon as the full realization that she already had level 2 reached him, his body froze with shock and he couldn't move. At first glance, a second level. That's only 1 level more than his. But on the other hand, the second level is twice as much as the first level. They had started the game at the same time. How could she increase her level in such a short time? Nervously nibbling his finger, a theory popped into his head that while he was in the real world resting, she had managed to find a way to level up quickly. Maybe she had found a gap in the rules of the game. Or maybe she had bribed the guide. All of these thoughts kept him on his toes, still looking at her and being in a state of shock and nervousness. He thought that she was masquerading as a harmless girl, but in fact she was a real and ruthless monster, wanting to become stronger and crush everyone in her path. This woman is a terrifying adversary. Noticing that he was only level 1, Yunshan asked him why he had decided to go to this dungeon. While she saw him as a recent acquaintance that she had crossed paths with in the beginner's dungeon, he saw her as a ruthless monster that was slowly approaching him. You must have drawn the lucky ticket like me? This question refused to be rather mysterious to Wang Ziyuan, and he asked her what she meant. Holding out her hand, she said that they were artifacts that allowed players to go through random dungeons. It was said to be the easiest way to get rewards at low levels. Yunshan said that if she wasn't afraid of being in her personal space, she would hardly use these artifacts at all. Once again, Wang Ziyuan was gradually learning new elements of such a vast game, and now he had managed to learn about such a useful item. The lower the level was, the higher the chance of obtaining this artifact. In simple words, it was an artifact created to help a beginner level up faster. But according to her, besides the fact that she could use these artifacts 3 times, they had the problem that their owner could find a dungeon of any difficulty level. Last time it was easy. This time it was hard. She was getting discouraged. But her team had started out pretty well. It was evident from Wang Ziyuan's face that he was hiding his sense of unease with great difficulty. Meanwhile, watching as the body and comrade slowly disappeared, the Braves were a bit desperate, due to the fact that He Xiaotian was one of the best in their team. Who would have thought that he would be eliminated so quickly? The first Brave was Yu Tong, nicknamed the Soldier. The second Brave was Mao Yiwen, and she said she knew He Xiaotian. He was a great guy, always helping his team get extra honors. The third Brave was Tony, nicknamed the Keeper. He said that he had also had the chance to play once with him. He was called the Explorer. It was a title he really deserved. The team of Braves realized that in this kind of game, it is most important to figure out the identity of the demon, in which he would not be equal. So they decided to get rid of him at all costs. Wang Ziyuan listened to their discussion with great interest, and suddenly he realized that that idiot had noticed that the backup was approaching too fast, so he decided to block their passage to buy some time. Even though they had lost an important member of the team, they decided not to be upset and move on. Also, Mao remembered that self-destruct technique. It was quite frightening, and she too managed to dodge. Tony said he had to try his best to save her. On the main thing was that everything ended well. After analyzing the conversations of the Braves, Wang Ziyuan realized that in this game, the personalities and individual abilities of each of the players were extremely important. In that case, the warmongers had done their best, and to ensure that their sacrifice was not in vain, he must act. But he also wondered, what's the use of a Tier 1 player? On top of that, the demon's ability was still inactive. But with his small level, even this kind of enhancement would be difficult to use to get rid of someone. For a few seconds, he plunged into the very depths of his mind, trying to think through his future plan for triumphant victory. And after a few seconds, smiling a devilish smile, he realized that the only way out was to research the tower and max out his abilities. But the most important element of the plan was to let the Braves kill each other. Slowly approaching the Braves, hiding his demonic nature, he asked them if they could be of any help. The two of them were new to this game and had no idea what to do next. And suddenly Mao remembered that in addition to the experienced players, there were two newcomers among them. Yu Tong, like a military man, didn't use too many words and told them to just explore the area and wait for the meeting. And that was all they had to do. Pretending to be a helpless rookie, he told them that after seeing their combat power in such a grand fight, he thought that the lack of combat power and experience would only limit the team's overall potential. However, fortunately, everything ended in their favor. Analyzing the situation, Tony realized that this time they had two newcomers with them, who couldn't really compete in the battle. However, aside from the fact that there were two rookies, he was concerned about why the three demons had decided to split up. 3-on-4 was a pretty good turn of events, greatly continuing to play the role of a member of the Brave team. He said that those two were quite strong opponents and could sacrifice themselves, only having some trump card as a last resort. So the remaining third demon would also have to be incredibly capable, strong enough to get rid of all the Braves. Upon hearing such an entertaining theory about the last remaining demon, the three Braves looked at each other with disapproving glances, and in the same second of pointing at each other, they began to suspect each other of the last third demon lurking among them. Each of the three Braves came up with amazing arguments and accusations against the other Brave. Things were starting to happen exactly as he had planned. The worst-case scenario for him would be if they decided to work together. Suddenly, an angry male voice was heard from somewhere nearby, calling the gathered people a bunch of scum. Not even a few seconds later, a huge stone hand grabbed Wang Ziwan's head and lifted the air. In the same second, the stone hand hurled him with tremendous force. Seeing such a treacherous and despicable act, Yunshan wondered who could have done such a thing. The other Braves were also shocked by this sudden turn of events, but only Yu Tong kept his sanity and assumed that it was the last demon. Lin Yao, nicknamed Golem, whose gaze was filled with raging madness, said that if he was a demon, he and Shu Miao would have dealt with the Braves long ago. He once again called them a bunch of scum who blindly believed some rookie. He claimed that the last demon was a kid who had level 1. He thought it was impossibly obvious. He couldn't fight on his own, so the only way out was to deceive the others. Running up to the injured Wang Ziwan, Yunshan immediately gave him the first aid kit. After thanking her for such a noble deed, he told her that he would return it to her later. After struggling to get up, he asked Lin Yao a logical question. Even if he was a demon, what was the point of him doing all this? Even if there would only be 2 people on the final ballot. But without letting him tell him who would be the second person on the final ballot, Lin Yao grabbed him with a furious force with his stone hand and with great fury in his voice told him to shut up. Lin Yao looked at Wang Ziwan like a madman who couldn't control his anger and was like a time bomb that from one wrong move could explode at any moment. Of the 9 players who had originally participated in this dungeon, only 6 remained. And while the demon team had only 1 player left, the Brave team was missing only 1 player, and the numerical advantage was clearly in their favor. But who knows how events would unfold? Seeing Lin Yao mercilessly bullying the newcomer, Mao immediately rushed to the rescue, slashing the stone hand with her knife. As he landed on the ground and greedily gulped in air, he thanked her for helping him out. However, he realized that Lin Yao possessed a truly immense strength. If this continued, he would not be able to continue with his original plan. However, he wondered, why didn't this guy just kill him? His first attack had blown away more than half of Wang Zhuyuan's health points, but this time he was definitely holding back as Wang Zhuyuan had 11% of his health points left. Keeping Lin Yao in his sights, Yu Tong asked him to calm his rage. They were all rookies once, so there was no need to behave inappropriately towards another rookie. Tony said that it was just a game. Who knows, maybe in the future we'll get to play again. Lin Yao realized that the situation was heating up by the second. If he was killed by someone who might be brave, then everyone else would immediately pounce on him. It might seem like the Brave team had advantages. However, in the game, it didn't matter at all. Judging from Lin Yao's character and temperament, he preferred to act alone, but he had to accept the current state of affairs. But he wasn't like the players who had already resigned themselves to the in-game system and principles. He was different from those who thought it was just a game. He wanted to be the winner no matter what. Putting his arm around Yunshan's shoulder and walking over to the rest of the Braves, Wang Zhuan said that there was no point in staying here. Then why don't they split up and explore the tower? He reminded them that at the beginning of the game, there was a mention of extra rewards scattered everywhere. However, Mao was reluctant to accept such a risky idea, because when they split up, it would be much easier to kill them one by one. And a player from the demon team would definitely hide the clues he found. Wang Zhuan said that he understood Mao's concerns, so he suggested that they split into teams of 2. Lin Yao was interested in this, because each will keep an eye on his partner, and when the blood moon begins, it is necessary to stay together to make sure that your partner, like you, cannot move in the dark. In this way, the demon will either reveal itself to the Braves, starting to act, or they will be able to find clues and safely eliminate the demon hiding among them. Lin Yao agreed with the rookie's words, as Wang Zhuan thought this was the most suitable plan. And as Lin Yao continued to speak, he didn't notice Wang Zhuan smiling a devilish smile, feeling proud of how he had fooled 5 brave men at once without much difficulty. Running up to Yunshan, Mao suggested that she work as a team. Tony said that he would take care of the second rookie since Yunshan had gotten Mao. Yutong didn't object to this team assignment, but unexpectedly, Wang Zhuan said that he wanted to go with Lin Yao. To Lin Yao, such an unexpected proposal sounded quite strange. Continuing to play the role of a brave man magnificently and hiding his demonic nature, Wang Quan said that he could not fight at all, and Lin Yao was the strongest here. Wang Zhuan said that he was going to put his life on the line in this game so that they would find out which team Lin Yao was playing for. Otherwise, what if he decided to target someone and the strongest once the blood moon came? Lin Yao was intrigued and very interested. This was something unexpected for him. Yutong explored the first floor and the lobby together with Tony. The second and third floor was explored by Lin Yao and Wang Zhuan. And the last 4th floor was explored by Mao together with Yunshan. Opening the door to the room filled with books on the 4th floor, what Mao and Yunshan saw was that absolutely the entire room was on fire. Mao picked up one of the books that lay on the floor and wondered, was it the guy who set the fire himself? She was saddened by the fact that such a valuable place was practically burned to the ground, because it would have been possible to find many clues leading to the unraveling of the demon's identity. Experiencing feelings of anxiety, being in such an unfamiliar and frightening place for her, Yunshan asked Mao. Then exactly what clues would be given to them? Would they be given a name? Running up to her, Mao told her that since she was older than her, she could call her Mao Mao. Yunshan was a little embarrassed by this. Mao told her that she could relax. She realized that she might not be used to being in this world, but she was sure that Yunshan would soon realize how cool the game was. She realized that she might not be used to being in such a world, but she was sure that Yunshan would soon realize how cool the game was. Deciding not to waste time, Mao immediately started looking for clues, saying that according to her experience, a clue could be a thing that reacts when a demon is nearby. Yunshan asked her if they needed to look for certain artifacts. However, she did not notice how the floor under her feet was covered in a bright scarlet glow. And in that second, a small demon appeared behind her back. And as soon as it was behind her back, her body was gripped with fear, because she felt the presence of a stranger behind her. But Mao was going to leave her to her fate. With one deft movement of her hand, she threw the knife, hitting the little demon directly. She said that this dungeon had been unusual to her from the start. She assumed that these things were placed here as traps. However, the difficulty level of the dungeon wasn't very high, so there shouldn't be too many of them. At the very least, they shouldn't have caused any significant damage. Yunshan, being unprepared for such a sudden turn of events, just sat on the floor still feeling a slight shiver all over her body. Our story then moves to the 2nd floor, where strange and loud noises were heard nearby. As they walked forward and overcame the traps, Lin Yao remembered how they had first encountered the mad rats in the dining hall, then the jumping chest, and now they were being attacked by the reanimated armor. How many more traps were there? And while Lin Yao continued walking forward, Wang Zhuan stood aside and simply supported him with his applause. Feeling unbearably furious at the traps that prevented him from advancing, he asked Wang Zhuan in a fierce voice, why was he standing so far away? Wang Zhuan said that he would come closer to him soon. He smiled a sinister smile, for he realized that Lin Yao was now obligated to protect him. After all, If he accidentally died during the research process and it turned out that he was a rookie, all suspicions would be directed at Lin Yao, and Lin Yao himself was well aware of this. Lin Yao asked him if he was intentionally going to fall into one of the traps. Wang Ziyuan told him that even if he wanted to, he couldn't know where they were set up. It was just a coincidence. He didn't even know why he was so unlucky. Lin Yao wondered, was this bad luck a curse? But even if it was, the effect of this curse wasn't strong enough to affect him as well. He knew that newcomers only had worthless F-rank abilities, so he thought that the demon was indeed one of those three. Holding the lucky coin in his hand, he was glad that he could use this thing forever, activating all the mechanisms within its range. He didn't even need to fight, he could just hide. This tower must be full of artifacts that would help him become stronger. But suddenly, like thunder, the realization hit him that this tower was the dwelling place of demons. He remembered that the description of the dungeon said that the Braves were a group of people who came here to fight demons. But as he gazed at the bell glowing brightly with yellow light, he wondered why there was a bell of justice to condemn the demons themselves in the demon's lair. This question with a furious force tormented his soul, not giving peace for a second.